A thin teenage boy from the crowded streets near Carbon Market in Cebu City stepped onto the dazzling stage of Ireland's Got Talent as if he didn't belong there. His clothes were simple, faded jeans, a loose shirt, and shoes that had already survived too many rainy days. The bright lights above him felt almost too luxurious for someone used to dim street lamps and humid nights. But he kept walking, his eyes quietly searching the huge hall in front of him, trying to hide the fear running through his chest. People in the audience whispered the moment they saw him. A few raised their eyebrows. Others leaned toward their friends, curious but doubtful. They had expected a polished performer, not a shy Filipino teenager who looked like he had walked miles before reaching the stage. Judge Fiona, famous for her sharp critiques, sat with her arms crossed. She studied the boy closely, and although her face remained strict, there was something in her eyes that softened for just a second. Judge Daniel leaned forward, noticing the trembling hands of the young contestant. There was something unusual about him, something fragile, yet confidently held together by determination. The third judge exchanged a look with Daniel, silently wondering what kind of story the boy carried. The host standing backstage whispered to another crew member, "He traveled alone. Barely had money for the bus. Said he would walk if he needed to." That alone made the boy's presence on the stage heavier, more meaningful. When the music began, a soft introduction of Elvis Presley's "Can't Help Falling in Love" echoed through the hall. The boy inhaled deeply, and for a moment the world seemed to stop around him. Then he released the first note, deep, smooth, golden, and unexpectedly rich. The sound cut through the hall like warm sunlight breaking through a cold morning. Every judge instantly lifted their head. The audience froze. Nobody expected such a voice from someone who looked so fragile and so poor. Fiona slowly lowered her hand from her mouth, stunned by the purity of his tone. Daniel blinked twice, leaning closer, unable to believe what he was hearing. The third judge felt a sudden sting in his eyes. The boy sang each lyric as if he were telling his own story. His voice carried the pain of hunger, the quiet nights he spent sleeping beside his siblings, the markets where he helped his mother sell whatever they could just to survive. He wasn't just singing, he was giving the audience every piece of his heart. As the chorus hit, his voice soared higher, filled with emotion that made the audience rise to their feet without realizing it. Some people wiped their tears. Others held their hands to their chest. By the time he reached the final soft note, the hall was completely silent, stunned, moved, transformed. When the music faded, the entire audience burst into applause so loud it shook the stage. The judges stood, clapping with tears in their eyes. None of them expected that voice. None of them expected that power from a boy who came with nothing but a dream. The story of the poor Cebuano Elvis spread quickly backstage after his first breathtaking performance. Crew members who normally ignored contestants couldn't stop talking about him. Some replayed his audition on their phones, shaking their heads in disbelief. A makeup artist whispered, "That boy sings like he's carrying the whole world inside him." Even the stagehands, usually busy and serious, paused to catch a glimpse of him as he waited quietly for his next turn. He sat alone on a small bench, hands clasped together, staring at the floor. He wasn't thinking about fame or winning. He was thinking about his family in Cebu, his mother waking up before sunrise to gather laundry, his siblings hoping he would bring home good news, and his father working long hours despite his back pain. All of those memories rested heavily on his shoulders. When his name was called for the second performance, he stood up slowly and walked toward the stage with a deep breath. The lights dimmed as he appeared again before the judges. The audience erupted with cheers, already recognizing him and wanting more. But he didn't smile, he was too focused. He knew that every second on that stage mattered. He knew that one song could change everything for his family. The music began, an Elvis rock ballad, strong and powerful. The audience expected him to copy it exactly, but halfway through the song, he did something unpredictable. He changed the style completely, softening the melody and adding a soulful Filipino twist that reflected the emotion he felt deep inside. His voice dipped lower, then rose with painful honesty, as though he were pouring his struggles into every note. He wasn't performing anymore, he was confessing. The judges reacted instantly. Daniel froze, tears forming almost immediately as he listened to the raw emotion in the boy's voice. Fiona stood up slowly, stunned by the control and depth he was showing. She often criticized performers for trying too hard, but this boy wasn't trying at all, he was simply being himself, and that was more powerful than any technique she had ever seen. The third judge pressed his fist gently against his lips, fighting the tremble in his breath. He could feel the pain behind the lyrics, the longing, the hunger, the courage that only a poor child fighting for his family could understand. The boy's voice cracked at one moment, not from a mistake but from a crushing surge of emotion. Instead of ruining the performance, it created silence so deep that even the cameras seemed to pause. The entire audience leaned forward as if the world had shrunk to that single fragile note. And then he recovered, finishing the rest of the song with a strength that brought many to tears. As he delivered the final line, the theater exploded with shouts, applause, and cries. People rose to their feet, chanting loudly, begging without hesitation, "Golden buzzer! Golden buzzer!" The boy was still catching his breath when all three judges slammed the golden buzzer at the same time. Gold confetti shot upward, filling the air like falling stars. He dropped to his knees, overcome, shaking with disbelief as tears streamed down his face. He had given everything he had, and Ireland gave him back a dream he never expected to reach. On the night of the finals, the boy from Cebu stepped onto the Ireland's Got Talent stage with the same simplicity he carried from home. No glittering jacket, no special styling, no designer shoes. He wore a plain white shirt, old dark slacks, and the same worn shoes he had brought from the Philippines. The audience already adored him, and when they saw him walk out, many stood and clapped even before the music began. They weren't cheering for a superstar, they were cheering for a poor boy who had fought every step of the way just to stand under those bright lights again. The judges watched him with a different kind of attention. Fiona's eyes softened the moment she saw him. Daniel leaned his elbows on the desk, hands clasped tightly, as if he was afraid he might cry before the song even started. The third judge breathed deeply, preparing himself because he knew what this boy was capable of. They had all seen singers come and go, but something about this young Filipino carried a truth none of them forgot. He didn't just sing, he made people feel. The music began, the opening notes of Suspicious Minds, familiar yet heavy with emotion. The boy closed his eyes and let the first line escape his lips, smooth and haunting. His voice echoed through the hall like a prayer. It wasn't loud, but it was powerful. Every word felt like a memory. Every breath carried something from home. As he reached the middle of the song, he made a choice that nobody expected. He softened the music, lowered his voice, and quietly added a line in Bisaya, "Para nisa akong pamilya." The moment the words left his lips, the audience gasped. They didn't understand the language, but they felt the meaning. It was for his family. It was for Cebu. It was for everyone who had ever dreamed while having nothing. Daniel broke first. A tear slipped down his cheek, and he didn't even try to hide it. Fiona pressed her hand against her heart, whispering, this boy is pure soul." The third judge wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, shaking his head in disbelief at how someone so young could carry so much emotion. The boy's voice rose higher, trembling slightly but never losing control. It was a voice shaped by hunger, by hope, by long nights imagining a different life. The entire hall grew silent, listening as if their hearts were tied to each note he sang. Even the camera operators slowed their movements, afraid to break the moment. When he delivered the final line, holding the last note with a gentle ache that cut through every heart in the room, he bowed his head softly as the music faded. For a full 5 seconds, the hall remained completely silent. Then everything erupted. People stood, shouting, cheering, crying. Some reached out their hands toward him as if he were someone they needed to thank. The judges didn't stay seated, they rushed onto the stage, all 3 of them, surrounding him in a tight embrace. Gold confetti didn't fall this time, but tears did, his and theirs. Ireland had seen great voices before, but nothing like this. A poor Filipino Elvis from the streets of Cebu had done the impossible. He had moved a nation to tears. He had become unforgettable.